Welcome back to the BoshNRoll channel. Today it is my tournament report from Eternal Weekend Asia in Yokohama, Japan. Thanks to Moxfield.com, who sponsored the whole trip. If you like seeing Moxfield creators in surprising places, be sure to reach out and tell them. And of course, if you're not hosting your decks on Moxfield.com, you probably should be. That's where everybody is. I got there about 5 days early. It was supposed to be 6, but my plane got messed up in Atlanta, so I got to spend one of my Tokyo days in an Atlanta airport hotel, which is exactly how I want to spend that time. But yeah, we got to Tokyo, did some cool stuff like visit the Haruruya Tournament Center in Shinjuku, went to this cool LGS, which has these little tables and couches, and you're not allowed to wear shoes in there. It was super cozy. It was really nice. That was called Card Pot. We went to samurai school, learned how to swing a sword and shoot a bow and arrow. Just some cool Japan stuff we did before eventually going down to Yokohama and starting the events. I'll jump right into Legacy here. And I played the exact same decks in both formats, Vintage and Legacy, that I did in Italy. The reasons for that were, one, I did a lot of work before Italy, and I feel like that work still held up. The metagames didn't shift that much. And when I got back from Italy, I was sick as a dog. I had about 5 days between getting home from Italy and leaving for Japan, and I spent 4.5 of those days just sideways on the couch. I got up for half a day just to record my Italy Eternal Weekend report, and then I went back to bed. It was not great, but I was feeling pretty good by the time Japan came around. But that did not leave a lot of time to test or do anything different, which is fine, because the only thing that would have really talked me off it is if somebody broke Katara, Waterbending Master, which I now have in my hand. The set I ordered arrived while I was in Japan. I just didn't have access to that card, even if I wanted it. But that's okay. Reanimator, a deck I put a ton of work into. And now we have a cool win rate matrix posted by internet user Wakarock. And Reanimator, the things that I wanted to beat in testing Reanimator were Show and Tell, Mystic Forge, Ancient Tomb decks, and Is It Delver. Those were the things that we really locked in on as probably going to be pretty important in this metagame. And if you look at the win rate matrix, over 79 matches, slightly behind, but mostly a coin flip, 47% versus Is It Tempo, 42% versus Eldrazi. This is the Ancient Tomb deck we're actually scared of. Doomsday, massively favored. Sneak and Show, massively favored, 73%. Blue Cloud Post, 67% win rate. This is one that we identified, and I liked the matchup for. Affinity, this one popped up in Italy as a player. It won the tournament. I did defeat the person who won that tournament in the Swiss rounds with my Reanimator deck, though over more matches, it appears the matchup's actually terrible. Show and Tell, I guess separating Show and Tell from Sneak and Show is probably Omniscience. The 50-50 over 4 matches, not a big sample size here. 100% over Mystic Forge, that sounds right. And then 50-50s versus Oops All Spells and Ad Nauseam Tendrils, also over small sample sizes. But we are even to massively, crushingly positive versus all these combo decks. And then close versus Is It Tempo. And then very bad versus blue-black tempo, which I identified as a problem in Italy. I mentioned it at my Italy tournament report, but we were really expecting Is It to be much more popular than Dimir. And this is an interesting flip from the pre-ban metagame, because Dimir Tempo, a lot of people were just calling it bad Reanimator, but now it's hugely favored against Reanimator. And the reason for that is Orcish Bowmaster. Now that the Reanimator deck has to spend 2 mana to draw cards and discard cards over and over again, Orcish Bowmaster is a massive threat against the deck, versus Entomb, which doesn't draw cards at all, and Bowmaster wasn't even necessarily included in a lot of decks that could play it because of it just didn't line up well versus Reanimator. But now that is completely flipped. We were aware of this, just hoping to dodge it or beat it. But this matchup spread does pretty much reflect what we were testing for. And that comes down to really, what did we play against in the tournament? The one card I was kind of thinking about up to the very end was the third Orcish Bowmaster over this Cling to Dust in the sideboard. And the Cling to Dust gives you just a little extra juice versus mirror matches or Oops All Spells, Cephalid Breakfast, those sort of things. It maps in versus Izzet Delver as well, because they do care about Delirium. They do use their graveyard for things like Murktide Regent. Gaining life can matter. It can kick into a draw engine because the games do go long. It's reasonable to cast Cling to Dust 3 times in a game, draw 3 cards off it while messing up their Delirium count. But you really want the third Bowmaster versus Blue-Black Tempo, which is one of the horrible matchups. So that's definitely a flex slot, and the third Bowmaster is, I think, the safe choice, but the Cling to Dust is the spicy choice, and I like a little spice, and I like putting the spice in those particular places. But I literally got home and just added and Japan to my Moxfield deck list from Italy because I made no changes. Of course, sponsored by Moxfield. I'm wearing that shirt right now. There it is, Moxfield shirt. There's 700 something people in the main event, and some weird stuff happened with the structure of the event. And I am going to talk about this a bit later when it becomes relevant to me, but long after the event was announced, and long after anyone traveling from the West would have had to book travel, Harayuya announced that Legacy would be a 2-day event, and day 2 would land right on top of Vintage. Eternal Weekends Italy and Pittsburgh were both 4-day events, so they could fully accommodate a whole day of trials and grinders and other events, and then a full day of Vintage, and then 2 full days of Legacy, so everybody could play everything that they want. The Japan event was 2 days, and they were offering the same stuff, which is a very shitty thing to find out when you've already booked a trip across the world. Which means that if you do well enough in Legacy, you just don't get to play Vintage. And if you're close, like if you're X2 or X3 at the end of day 1, do you want to try to grind out the last few rounds of Legacy, or would you rather start fresh in Vintage? It's just a stupid choice to have to make. And I think Harayuya really dropped the ball on this event in a variety of ways. The judge staff on site were phenomenal. The event was one of the best run I've ever seen. We were frequently turning around rounds in a 700-player tournament 4 to 6 minutes after time was up in the round. In America, that would have been 20 to 30 minutes every single round. It was like 4 to 6. They were on it. And shout out to the on-staff judges, but whoever booked the thing, set the whole thing up. Probably, my guess what happened is they were told they got an Eternal Weekend. They booked the venue. And then later they were told by Wizards that Legacy had to be a 2-day event. And rather than rent the hall for an extra day, they just decided to fuck all the players who wanted to play both. And, kind of whack, but I assume that they didn't run a bad event on purpose, but decisions were made and positions were put into that this is where we are. But anyway, 700 players. Day 1 is 9 rounds. I said X2, it's actually X3 makes day 2. And as a partial solution to the stupid 2-day thing, they did their day 2 cut in round 9 and then ran 2 more rounds. So it was actually 11 rounds of day 1, but a bunch of people were eliminated after round 9, which makes sense because that gives you 2 extra rounds of decision to make. Like if you limp into day 2 at X3 and then lose your next 2 on your X5, now you can just play Vintage, no sweat. Rather than having to skip Vintage to show up at X3, then you lose your next 2 and then you just have nothing to do all day. Or if you're X3 and then win, and then you're X3 2 rounds into day 2, you're so much closer to a promo there. Like I actually really like them adding the 2 extra rounds, but I don't like that they had to do that because they ran the event poorly in the first place. It was a pretty sad compromise, but I did appreciate them doing what they could do at that point. Round 1, I defeated Red Eldrazi. I identified this was a matchup that was scary in testing, and as we saw on this grid, turned out to be true. 42% win rate versus them, so that's far enough out that we don't call it a coin flip anymore. I'm fine calling 47% versus Izzet a coin flip, but 42, nah. That is actually a tough matchup. My opponent had strong starts and then just couldn't keep it going. A lot of the times the way that this matchup works in practice is they keep the hand. They have the chance to mulligan. So their first 1 to 3 turns are going to be good because they kept the hand. And then it's, does the top of the deck produce Reality Smasher or Eldrazi Linebreaker? Or does it produce 3 lands? Or does it produce 2 more Chalice of the Voids they don't need? And the next 1 to 3 draw steps they get really determine where it breaks after both players have spent the cards that they kept on the strength of. And my opponent just kind of flooded out game 1, and then game 2 had Chalice on 1 on turn 1, and then Chalice on 2 on turn 4, and that just really didn't do anything. And then at the end of the match, he showed me a handful of red cards and monocolorless mana. So I was pretty lucky to get away with that one. Round 2, I lost a blue post, which we identified was a good matchup and a reason to take the deck. But game 3, my opponent was on the play and had turn 1 land. I had turn 1 Tamiyo. Opponent had turn 2 Karn the Great Creator, which resolved and then tutored Tormod's Script. So on turn 2, I'm already in check to some disruption. And then on my turn, I brainstorm with the Tamiyo in play, trying to A, find interaction, B, flip Tamiyo. And opponent Force of Wills my brainstorm, which indicates that I had Force back up on the Karn, which I didn't have interaction for anyway, but it was there. And then I had a second brainstorm, which flipped Tamiyo, still missed on Force of Will. And I passed back, and opponent had another Urza's Tower. I tutored Mycosynth Lattice and just stuck it. And then after it resolved, also flashed me another Force. So their hand was a turn 3 win with Tormod's Crypt and 2 Force of Wills to back it up. You're just not going to win those. Sorry, folks. Round 3, I played against Simic Birthing Ritual, which was really cool. I haven't seen that in Legacy, but it is a known quantity in Modern. I thought seized my opponent game 1, and I saw a bunch of Icefang Coatls and a Aborenaculus, and I was like, okay, I know what this is because I play Modern. I was able to take the Aborenaculus, reanimate it, and just sort of beat him with his own card. And then I pivoted into my Bowmasters in game 2, and those just chew up decks built around Coiling Oracle and Icefang Coatl kind of stuff. Round 4 versus Sneak and Show. I don't specifically remember a lot of details of this. This is one of those hilariously positive matchups, 73%. Like, my monsters are better than theirs. Show and Tell is risky because I could also put in a monster that's just as good as theirs. I have 6 Forces and 4 Thoughtseizes in the main. I get to board in Bowmaster for some extra pressure. It's just a good matchup, and I was able to get away with it. I played against Eldrazi again. That identified difficult matchup, and this was one of those matches where I Thoughtseized my opponent a couple of times, so I knew what was in the hand at all times. And every turn, it was like 1 unknown card in hand, and it's the Kozilek's Command to blow up my Reanimate. And then 1 unknown card in hand, and it's the Thought-Knot Seer to mess up my next turn. Or I Wasteland the only mana they have, and their next 3 draw steps are like Eye of Ugin, Ancient Tomb, Eldrazi Temple, and they're just right back in. And my opponent also was just like really thoughtful and careful and doing all of the combat math, all of the possibility math. There was a spot where I had Thoughtseized a Reality Smasher, and I was holding Reanimate, and we were in a damage race, and I was just waiting for the moment where my opponent attacked a little too aggressively, and I could reanimate their Smasher and kill them, and they never did it. On the turns where they weren't showing Kozilek's Command, they left back all their blockers. On the turns where they were showing Graveyard Hate, they attacked aggressively. They really navigated it extremely well. These were really close, tight games, and the opponent was drawing well, but also was playing well, and that's a deadly combo. Then I played against 5-color Beans with Riddler, Quantum Riddler, and Felia. And this matchup feels to me like it should be more difficult than it is, but I have beaten it almost every time I played. I think I've lost to it once in all of my testing and all of everything. But it turns out they really just, once you get the first Atraxa rolling, even though they can kill it, this is where actually the Entomb ban helps. Was in the olden days, you had 1 Atraxa, 1 Archon, and if they Swords to Plowshares both of these, then your game 1 deck can't really win anymore. But having 4 Atraxas and 2 Archons it's pretty easy to get the third or fourth Atraxa going, and they really do run out of gas eventually on those. This opponent was playing really deliberately to the point where I realized I won game one with like 20 minutes left on the clock, and then they spent a long time sideboarding, a long time mulliganing, and I got to the point where I realized I could not lose the match because I won game one, and their deck is incapable of winning in the amount of time that they left for themselves to actually play game two. I did end up winning on turn 3 of turns, so it was a clean win, but I was going to win that match 1-0 no matter what. And if you're going to play these control decks, you need to be able to move quickly and make good decisions, but make them quick enough that you actually can play the matches. Round 7, I paired into INF, who's a legendary online Delver player, somebody who's always on the trophy board, always on the challenge top 8s. It was really cool to get to play one of these Japanese online legends in real life. And they were on Is It Delver, and I did take it. We had a pretty cool match. I won game 1 by just doing Reanimator stuff, and then I full pivot. Against Is It Delver, I bring in my entire sideboard except for the 2 consigned memories. This all 13 cards, fully cut the Reanimator stuff. You leave a couple Reanimates in because they're still good at targeting Barrogoyf, but all the monsters are out. You're trying to brick Graveyard Hate as much as you can, and the game just becomes about Barrogoyf. And I did that. Our game 2 got to a spot where it was like, I'm in complete control except Murktide Regent. Like, I had thought seized him, I had killed his stuff, I had 2 fatal pushes in my hand, but the one blind spot that my interaction had was Murktide, and he just slammed a Murktide on that turn, and it won. And then game 3 was kind of the same thing, but in reverse, where opponent had pretty good control over the situation, but I just stuck a Barrogoyf that was bigger than Lightning Bolt, and that carried the day. And then the last match that I chose to play, it was a loss to Is It Delver. Opponent just came out blazing. I think I won game 1 like I'm supposed to, and then the sideboard game on the play, it was like one of those Dragon's Rage Channeler, get Delirium immediately, just clap you for 6 3 times and the game is over. I didn't really have time to do anything or set anything up. And then game 3, I think, was a lot more of the same, where it was just the hyper aggression, and I didn't have a fatal push when I needed one, and died to their quick aggression. And here's where the structure of the event comes up poorly for me. 5-3, I'm still alive. If I win next round, I make day 2. X3 is still perfectly good to get a promo if you make a run after that. X4 might even get promos. X3-1 definitely does. Like, I am live for everything except top 8. I don't think X3 could top 8. We can actually find out. Okay, these are the final standings, and yeah, X3-1. Oh, these are including the losses. Okay, and X3 did actually make top 8. Wow, that's interesting. There ended up being exactly one X3. There were X3-1s and X2-1s all around them, but the only X3 in the tournament actually did make the top 8. That's actually pretty cool. Okay, so I was potentially live for top 8, definitely live for the promo. Top 32 was X4. There were a bunch of X4s that missed. There were a couple X4s that hit. But faced with the decision of, do I want to play 3 more rounds today? I have to win the next round to even make day 2. Then I have to win the next 2 to feel good about being in day 2. And at that point, I knew that even if I did win my next 3 in a row and go into Sunday at 8-3, I would still feel better being 0-0 in a new tournament than being X3 in this one. And I just made the decision to drop. I could have kept playing at least the last few rounds, but just balancing how tired I was, how hungry I was, wanting to have time to... There's like 20 cards of overlap between my Vintage and Legacy deck. It's like all these Bowmasters, the Thoughtseizes, all the Polluted Deltas, the Wastelands, the Underground Seas. There's a lot of overlap between the Vintage and Legacy deck, so I didn't want to have to be doing that at midnight, and I just made the decision to stop playing. And it felt bad to make that decision. I really believe in scrapping it out to the bitter end. Even if the odds are against you, like 5-3 in a 14-round tournament, I have to win 6 in a row to maybe make top 8. We take those odds. You're not dead yet. You're not dead till you're dead. I would have loved to play this out and tried to bubble in at X4 to get a promo or something, but it just wasn't available because Haruyuya chose to save money on a venue rather than give their players the event they signed up for. And I'm going to stop harping on that because I've said my piece on it.
This video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, the easiest way to build Magic decks online. Moxfield supports over 30 formats, including Legacy and everything else you'll see on this channel. There's multiple customizations so you can interact with your deck how you want. Views such as text, grid, or stacks, and groupings like type, subtype, color, color identity, even artist. The site offers light mode, dark mode, and so much more. However you want to see your deck, Moxfield can provide it for you. Follow my Moxfield to keep up with the channel and what I'm playing in paper. I'll see you there.
Let's go to Vintage Day. Oh, let's actually look at the Legacy results, because this is actually terrible for my deck selection. The top 8 was Sneak and Show, phenomenal matchup. Cradle Control, this isn't actually on the matchup matrix that we were looking at. It's just not there, not accounted for. Not a big enough meta share, I suppose, but I would consider Cradle Control the worst matchup in the entire format. You just can't keep up with them. They have main deck Endurance, they have main deck Bajuka Bog, and 8 ways to tutor it. They have their own Atraxa. If they have the natural order build, this one is not the natural order build, but sometimes they have their own Atraxas. Sometimes they can just beat Atraxa. Like, even if you use all your resources to limp an Atraxa into play and you draw the 3 or 4 cards you get off of her usually, they can still just grind through that. They can have Caracas. They can tempo you out with Talon Gates of Madara, just zoot out the zoot out the Atraxa and just hit you for a bunch. And they can do that twice. Terrible matchup. 3 copies of Dimir Tempo, terrible matchup. Affinity, like I said, I'm 100% lifetime over 1 match against it, though the grade size bad matchup. Is it Delver, Coin Flip, and Azoria Stoneblade, which I have not played against, but if we believe the grid, 30% matchup. So this top 8 actually would have been really horrible for Reanimator. And maybe the meta shifted enough that it was not a good choice for this tournament, even though I did feel it was a good choice for Italy. And I don't think I'm going to continue working on Reanimator moving forward, or at least not the blue tempo build. The combo builds are still kind of cool to think about. But I think I would just streamline my situation and play Dimir Tempo if I had a 4th Eternal Weekend tomorrow. Though Builder Burn, the Magic Online player Builder Burn, who I worked on Reanimator with, his list came out quite different than mine. When we talked about Careful Study, a card that you'll notice is not in my list because it's too bad on the juke. The Careful Study, playing Careful Study in Dimir Tempo, which is what you're trying to be after sideboard, if I do that 13-card juke and just have Careful Study still in my deck, that's like putting Faithless Looting in Is It Delver. It's card disadvantage for moderate card selection. If you're not actually using your graveyard, those cards are unplayable. And I realized you couldn't juke with Careful Study in your deck. So I switched it to Tainted Indulgence and Roiling Dragonstorm, which are card neutral or card positive, depending on various situations you can find yourself in. And Builder Burn went the other way, and he just doesn't juke. His sideboard, instead of Bowmasters and Fatal Pushes and stuff, is just Show and Tells. And he continues just being a monster deck even after board. And Show and Tell is very good versus Dimir Tempo. So if you want to keep working on Reanimator and you have a lot of Dimir Tempo in your metagame, you might want to think about Show and Tell in the sideboard rather than all of these fair tools that I'm messing with. Okay, that's the end of Legacy. Vintage time. New tournament. Moxfield shirt. Shout out Moxfield. I played Dimir Tempo. I just wanted to be safe. I played a busted combo deck that I really like in the Jeskai PO deck in Eternal Weekend US, and I went 0-3 drop, and it rattled me. And maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe I should just trust the data and understand that I had a tough run or whatever. But I really didn't like the experience of mulling to 5, having terrible hands, opponents keeping 7, dumpstering my ass. I wanted to keep 7 more and make more decisions rather than rely on the strength of a handful of Moxen in your opening hand, which PO does in some cases rely on. So I went with Dimir tempo, and I don't want to be results oriented that, you know, my tournament wasn't super successful, therefore the deck was a bad choice. But I do think that a deck like the Gifts Breach deck, a control deck with a combo finish, or Oath, which if you've been watching the channel, you know I tried so hard to justify Oath. I have a bunch of Oath leagues up on the channel testing for these events, and Oath just felt so clunky and bad. And there's some matchups that are just straight up unwinnable, and I just couldn't get myself to do it. But I do kind of regret not sending a little harder with a proper vintage deck. And this deck's really good, but it is a legacy deck, and the goal of this deck is to make your opponent fail to play vintage, so they have to play legacy with you, where you're built to do that and they're not. And I did top 8 Eternal Weekend last year with Lurrus control, so I have reps with it. I have a record with it. It felt so medium over Italy and Japan. But let's talk about the actual matches. Round 1, I lost a really tight mirror match. It was one of those situations where we both revealed Lurrus, and Lurrus could mean Breach combo, Lurrus could mean PO, Lurrus could mean a control mirror. It could even mean Doomsday. There are Lurrus Doomsday decks out there, and you have to keep a hand that seems reasonable. And my opponent just happened to have a hand full of Fatal Pushes, and that's great for the mirror. And I had a handful of Force of Wills and Force Negations, which is great if they're combo and terrible if they're the mirror. So I lost I lost game 1. I think I won game 2 by just, now I know what I need to do, sideboard out the bad cards, bring in the good ones, keep good hands. And then game 3 was super tight, and it came down to my opponent had Dothy Voidwalker in their deck, which is tech that I didn't have. And they managed to resolve it in a spot where it just froze out my Treasure Cruise, and it kept my Lurrus in check. I think I had Lurrus in play, but there was nothing to recur because of the Voidwalker. And eventually I had to Desperation Time Walk into the Voidwalker, and then 2 turns later they were able to use that Time Walk to kill me for Xaxes with a Psychic Frog. It was like jump frog, attack, discard my whole hand, hit you for half your life, cast Time Walk out of the Dothy Voidwalker, and then attack with that frog for the other half of the life. And it was a really good match. The Dothy Voidwalker tech was really tight for them. There were roughly 300 players, and that's a 9-round tournament, but they were going to run 8 rounds with a top 16 cut rather than 9 rounds with a top 8 cut. And one of my friends asked one of the judges why they did it that way, and the judge said, "Shh, it was a mistake." Like, they just posted it online as a cut to top 16, and then rather than walk it back and say, yeah, that was obviously a mistake, we're going to run our event correctly, they just ran it incorrectly. So another dumb thing, Haru, you did at the management level for this event. But okay, top 16 cut, at least we know. Round 2, I beat Jeskai PO. This is a tough matchup, but my opponent took a bunch of mulligans and kind of never really got anything going, which is good because if they get anything going, they quickly bury you. And I was able to just keep them off balance, get some frogs online, and take them down. White Initiative, I lost the die roll, which was tough. My opening hand had some Moxen and a Thoughtseize in it, where if I'm on the play, I have my mana set up, I get to poke their hand, perfectly map out everything I want to do, take their best threat, etc. But on the draw instead, they just had Archon of Emir in play, and now the Moxen are bricks, the Thoughtseize is too far behind, and they just ran me over. Game 2, I kept a hand with Vexing Bauble in it on the play. And this card, you board it out when you're on the draw because it's not going to be good enough. But on the play, the White Initiative deck is built on Chrome Mox, Black Lotus, the actual Moxen. They have so much 0 mana artifacts just to get, because they need to have 3 mana on turn 1. That's kind of their whole thing. And Vexing Bauble can just mind twist them if you're on the play. But this opponent, I played Vexing Bauble on turn 1. My opponent just said, okay. And then on their turn, played Plains Soul Ring. And I was like, okay, so they still got to 3 mana, but at least not right away. And on my turn, I Ancestral Recall. I play my land. I Thoughtseize my opponent. There is 0 cost cards in the hand. It was literally just like lands, Soul Ring, and threats. So my Bauble just didn't do anything. It was like I discarded a card and skipped a turn, and it was bad news. And because I Thoughtseized them twice that game and Gitaxian Probe them, I knew their whole hand the whole game. And it was, again, one of those situations like my Eldrazi opponent the day before, where it's like, okay, I know everything you have going on. Just don't draw exactly X. And then they drew exactly X on every turn of the game. And it was tough just watching that one slip away when my opening hand was so good. Round 4, I played against Jewel Shops, which is not a super popular deck in the metagame right now, but it does still exist. And it's one of the reasons to play Dimir. You're very good against these combo decks because you just have 7 forces and 2 Thoughtseizes and 3 Spell Pierces, and then you board in Null Rods, and you're just so good against decks like this. My opponent spoke basically no English, but used Google Translate to tell me that he had prepped for the event watching my videos, which was really nice. And we had a fun match where I did the most vintage shit my deck's capable of. Like I said, this is mostly a legacy deck that tries to make opponents play legacy. We don't really have busted vintage starts in general. But my opponent was on the play in game 1, set up like a Grim Monolith or something and passed the turn, like did something medium to get ready for turn 2. And oh no, I remember what it was. It was way better than that. They had turn 1 Lodestone Golem. That's what it was. It was like Mana Crypt, Ancient Tomb, Lodestone Golem. So they actually had a good start. And my opening hand was Black Lotus, which is unaffected by Lodestone Golem. Mishra's Bauble, unaffected by Lodestone Golem. So I Black Lotus, I play a Polluted Delta, I fetch for Underground Sea, I sack Black Lotus for blue, so I have black, blue, blue, blue floating, use blue, black to Fatal Push the Lodestone Golem, use the next blue for Ancestral Recall, use the last floating blue for Brainstorm, which hits 2 Mox in, and then I go Mox, Mox, Time Walk, and then go to my next turn. That is, I play 6 pieces of Power 9 in my deck, and I cast 5 of them on that turn. And my opponent was like, and I went, vintage, which it transcended the language barrier. And opponent also had, vintage. And it was really fun. And that was the most busted draw I have of the whole tournament, and my opponent was a great sport about it. The BoshNRoll channel is brought to you by Tales of Adventure. TOAMagic.com has almost 100,000 unique cards in stock. They offer free track shipping on every order, plus next day or 2-day options when you have an event coming up fast. They offer on-site pickup at major Magic events throughout the US, so you're never scrambling before your tournament. Stop by their booth to buy, sell, or trade at upcoming regional championships, Magic Con, Spotlight Series, and more. I love their selection of individually scanned high-end cards that show you exactly what you're buying. And the best part is saving 5% on every order with promo code BOSH. From Ancestral Recall to Zombie Master, get what you need quickly and in one place at TOAMagic.com. Eternal lives here. Round 5, I lost to non-Lurrus Jeskai Pio, which was kind of a head trip for me. They definitely had some bruise advantage because they didn't reveal Lurrus, which puts me into a certain wedge of decks. And then they had a quick tinker for Bolas' Citadel and just buried me in game 1. And I didn't, like, Blue Tinker is an archetype, and Jeskai Pio is an archetype that usually uses Lurrus, and it can't have Bolas' Citadel because it has Lurrus. And I sideboarded like they were Blue Tinker, which I perceive as a good matchup because, like I said, we're so good against these combo decks because of our 7 forces, 2 Thoughtseizes, 3 Spell Pierces, all that. But my opponent was actually just on Jeskai Pio, which is a bad matchup because they have stock ups and Pios and Thundertrap Trainers and all these things that outmuscle your forces. And my opponent was just that, but instead of playing Lurrus, they had a Tinker package, and my sideboard did not keep up, and the game did not come to the Lurrus phase of the game. Lurrus is obviously a busted card, but if the game doesn't go super long to the point where you buy it, then deploy it, then get value doing stuff out of your graveyard, then who cares if you even have it? If you're just tinkering for Bolas and Citadel, who needs Lurrus? This one was tough, though. In our game 3, I Thoughtseize probed my opponent. I saw that he had no lands. I resolved a Null Rod, and his board was Mox Tundra. Then I wastelanded the Tundra, and then he drew for turn, passed with no play, no mana, can't do anything. And then on the very next turn, drew and played Tolarian Academy, and then was just completely out of the lock. So that also happened to me in round 1 of the Eternal Weekend in Italy. And it was like deja vu. It's like, no, I did everything I was supposed to do. Tolarian Academy, why? But that's vintage. Round 6, I played against Jewel Shops. Remember I said that's not a very popular deck? Well, here it is again. My opponent was really nice, and he had these like silly little, they looked like aliens. They're like plushy aliens. They were probably like 2 or 3 inches long. And one had a sad face and one had like a crying face. And he just put them on the table and made a joke like, those are my companions. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then I mulliganed, and he put the sad one in front of me. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to mulligan again and let him put the crying one in front of me. So I did keep 6. The plushies got me. But we had a good back and forth, cool interaction, and I was able to win. Round 7, another Dimir Lurrus mirror. My opponent mulled to 5 game 1, and I had a protected Ancestral Recall to open, and I just had so many more cards than them. Game 2, I was way ahead, but they commandeered my Momentum Breaker. There's a 1 of Momentum Breaker in the deck. This card's pretty sweet. And Commandeer is like Force of Will, but you have to pitch 2 blue cards, and then you get the spell instead of countering it. And I had 2 frogs to my opponent's 1 frog, and they had some cards in hand, and I was like, Momentum Breaker, thinking the worst thing that could happen is they Force of Will, then they're down 2 cards, then my 2 frogs take over. But they commandeered it. Momentum Breaker kills one of my frogs. Now we both have 1 frog, and combat doesn't work for me. But I was able to still squeeze it out eventually, but getting commandeered in the Dimir Lurrus mirror was messed up. And then the final round, round 8, because they didn't run 9 rounds for some reason, I had a awesome top deck war slugfest versus Jewel Shops. Remember Jewel Shops? Not that popular. Here it is for the 3rd time in the tournament. My opponent was on the play and had a turn 1 Trinisphere off of Mishra's Workshop. And I forced it, and he forced back. And he basically had, I think, how does that work? Okay, so there was a shop, a Mox, a Trinisphere, force blue card. Okay, so 2 cards left in hand after that. I pass to me, I wasteland the shop, and then he draws and just passes back. So he doesn't have another land. He's stuck under Trinisphere. I'm stuck under Trinisphere. I have 1 fetch land in my hand. I need to draw 2 more before I can really do anything. I actually kept a hand with 2 Moxes in it, so that Trinisphere was devastating. And the game really was just like draw, go, just go to discard, hit a land. Like now I have 2, but one of them's Wasteland. And then he hits Ancient Tomb, which with the Mox on turn 1 gets Tezzeret into play. And then I have to set myself back 1 of my precious lands to Wasteland the Ancient Tomb. And then Tezzeret just sits in play for like 3 turns, not really doing anything. And then I hit my 2nd land, and then I pass back, and like I hit a fetch land, which can get the Surveil land, which is 2 looks at my 3rd land, which is almost unlocking me. And on that turn, he draws Ancient Tomb, which plays Time Vault from hand, and then Tezzeret goes off. So it was like a crazy slugfest back and forth, and it was super animated. We both were just having fun at that point, where every draw was like, like we were being like super silly about it. And, you know, we just smashed that back and forth with crazy top decks, and I eventually lost. Justin Gennari was sitting next to me. I am actually level 1, also at 4-3, and he won his match and ended up in like 74th place. So we were playing for stone nothing at this point, which did make me feel better. I wasn't sure if there was, because with 8 rounds, I don't know how the math works. Like, that's just not enough rounds to reach a conclusion of a Swiss tournament with 300 players. And I don't know if that encourages or discourages draws among the top 32. I don't know what the cut to top 16 looks like. And I know I'm dead for top 16, but I don't know if like everyone has to play and maybe I could stumble into top 32. I have no idea. And Justin finishing in like 74th, it did make me feel better that I didn't win this last round. And there it is. That is the third of 3 Eternal Weekends. I am pretty tired. I missed Thanksgiving. My birthday was also over the time that I was in Tokyo, which was cool for me, but kind of a bummer for my family. So this was a lot of travel during a holiday-laden time of year for Americans. I don't know if I'm going to do all 3 again. I don't know if this is going to be something I try to do every year, but definitely thank you so much to Moxfield.com for making it possible this one time. It's tough to fire 6 bullets and come home with 0 promos. I did play in every possible event and got nothing for it. I got like min cash in the Legacy event in Italy, which is not promos, like top 64 prizes. So a lot of traveling, a lot of playing, not a lot of winning this season, but that's okay. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of cool places. I'd never been to Italy or Japan before. Check those boxes. I really hope Italy gets the Eternal Weekend next year. They did a great job hosting that one. I hope whoever gets it in Asia next year does a better job structuring the event so players can actually play in the tournaments that they flew across the world to play in. That would be great. But as always, shout out to everyone, all my opponents, super nice, everyone who came up and had me sign their ponders or take selfies, or and especially impressed with the people who don't speak a word of English who are still watching my videos. Like, shout out to you. I don't know if that's YouTube auto-generating captions for them or if they're just looking at what's happening and doing their best to understand it, but whatever it is, shout out to them. I'm going to leave this one here. One last thank you to Moxfield.com. Everybody, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon to support the channel, and I'll see you next time.